Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. La'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. La'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, we're back. Again, before we even start, put a little bit of money in your tzedakah box. Always need to give charity. Always, 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 always. All right, so last week we started talking about Talmud. Remember that it means you will learn or you will study, that thematically there's the halacha, the law, there's the agadah, the stories. We talked about that structurally. There's the Mishnah and there's the Gemara. The Mishnah that was assembled by Rabbi Judah Hanasi, and the Gemara, the additional comments on it. And we talked about all those dialogues and the lights changing in some way. So we talked, is that good? Okay. So we talked about all those kind of things. And we talked a little bit about the relationship between Yochanan and Reish Lakish. We talked about Pirkei Avot. We talked about the beginning of Pirkei Avot. It gives us the order of how this oral Torah was passed down. So this is one of my favorite sessions to do. It is so strange to be doing it without a bunch of people in front and having dialogue. So I'm going to ask for your forgiveness again. But it's really a wonderful, we're going to explore Talmud and how beautiful and wonderful and fabulous it is. So you have a handout. You can find it. There are links to it, I believe, on the video, either right below it. There's in the comments, there's a arrows pointing or thumbs pointing or something. So you can download that and you can be studying this and reading it. If you have a question that you want to type in, I don't think you can do that on YouTube. I'm not sure. You can? Okay. And I know you can do it on Facebook as well. So we're going to start studying Talmud. Now, again, we talked about the fact that often there were pairs of sages. They were sparring partners like Yochanan and Reish Lakish, who were both good friends, but they were sparring partners. Again, we do not believe that our opponent is evil in Judaism. They are someone else who can give us an understanding of both our own perspective and their perspective. God is not infinite, or God is infinite. Therefore, no one person can have a total understanding. And so the dialogue, as we learned with Reish Lakish and Yochanan last week, is very, very important. So we're going to study a little bit about some of these sparring partners and study some Talmud real specifically from the pages. So I'd like you to turn to page 2, the page that says Hillel on it. And again, it's weird not having people go around and read it, but we'll make do. There are two throughout the Talmud. Again, Talmud's not linear, but throughout the Talmud we find dialogues between some of the sparring partners, and two of the great sparring partners are Hillel and Shammai, and what we call Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, which means their house or their disciples as well. The reality is that Shammai is usually right. If you just think of it as legalistic and as intellectual, Shammai is usually right. But we usually side with Hillel, because Hillel doesn't just look from the mind, he actually understands more than Shammai. He looks from a very loving, compassionate, empathetic place. So the Talmud becomes something that we can live with, that can move through us and change us as human beings in a positive way. So we usually side with Hillel. I'm going to study right here a little bit. This is from a secta, that means the tractate on Shabbos, called Shabbos. And this is page 30b. This is the page that looks like this. It says Hillel, handwritten, and we're going to start reading. Again, the dark print is what it actually says in the Talmud, and the light print is what the editors put in to make this shorthand of Talmud have grammatical sense in terms of the sentences. So the Gemara cites some examples of ways that Hillel responded to sarcastic or otherwise improper questions. The rabbis taught in a Baraisa, an early teaching, one should always strive to be humble and gentle in his ways like Hillel, and one should not be stern and unyielding like Shammai. And the Baraisa illustrates this with a story. It once happened, we turn the page, that two men made a bet with one another. They said, whomever goes and provokes Hillel to lose his temper, let him take 400 zuz as his prize. And thereupon one of them said, I will provoke him. So the bet is who can get Hillel angry, who can get him frustrated and make him yell or get upset. That was very easy to get Shammai upset. This is about Hillel. So they're betting $400 that one guy says, I can make him angry. The events are recounted as follows. That day, as it so happened, was Friday, the evening of Sabbath. And Hillel was busy washing his head, in other words, his hair, in preparation for Sabbath. So he's taking a bath. Okay, he's showering and washing his hair, getting ready for the Shabbat. As he was doing so, this person who made the bet went and passed by the doorway of his house, calling, "Is there a Hillel here? Is there a Hillel here?" Hillel put on his cloak and went out to greet the person. So he gets out of the bath, puts on his bathrobe, and comes out to greet the person. And he said to him, "My son, what do you seek?" The person replied to him, "I have a question to ask of you." Hillel said to him, "Ask, my son, ask." And the person then posed his query. "Why is it that the heads of the Babylonians are so round?" Hillel replied to him, "My son, you've asked a truly profound question. The reason is because they do not have skillful midwives." So the guy figures he's going to get Hillel angry because he's going to ask him a ridiculous question. Why do Babylonians have round heads? Hillel says, just gives him honor. He says, this is a profound question. It's because they don't have skillful midwives. The person went away and waited a while. And then he returned to the front of Hillel's house. Now, he went away, and Hillel went back to his bath and started shampooing his hair again. He called out in front of Hillel's house, "Is there a Hillel here? Is there a Hillel here?" Hillel again put on his cloak and went out to greet the person and said to him, "My son, what do you seek?" The person replied to him, "I have a question to ask of you." And Hillel said to him, "Ask, my son, ask." The person said, "Why is it that the eyes of the Talmudians are especially round?" And Hillel replied to them, "My son, you've asked a truly profound question. It's because they live in sandy terrain. They live in the desert." So another ridiculous question. The guy is hoping to get Hillel angry since he keeps getting pulled out of his bathtub to come answer these silly questions. But Hillel gives him great respect. The person then went away and waited a while again. So he waited until Hillel was once again washing his hair. Then he returned to Hillel's door and called out, "Is there a Hillel here? Is there a Hillel here?" Once again, Hillel put on his cloak and went out to greet him and said to him, "My son, what do you seek?" The person replied to him, "I have a question to ask of you." Hillel said to him, "Ask, my son, ask." The person asked, "Why is it that the feet of Africans are so wide?" Hillel replied to him, "My son, you have asked a profound question. The reason is because they live in swamplands." This guy's figuring he's going to get Hillel angry, and he just can't do it, even with these ridiculous questions. Having failed to exasperate Hillel with his earlier questions, the person made one last attempt to do so. He said to him, "I have a great many questions to ask, and I am fearful that you may become angry with me." Hillel wrapped himself in his bathrobe and his cloak, and he sat down in front of the man, and he said to him, "Every question you have to ask, feel free to ask." So even though he's preparing for Sabbath, he takes the time to spend with another human being. Every question you ask, ask. The person then said to him, "Are you the great Hillel whom they call the Nasi, the prince of the Jewish people?" Hillel said to him, Hillel said to him, "Yes." And the person that said to him, "If it is indeed you, let there not be many like you among the Jewish people." Hillel replied, "My son, why do you say such a thing?" The person responded, "Because of you, on your account, I lost 400 zuz. I lost $400. And he revealed to Hillel about the wager he had made. Hillel responded to him, "One should always vigilantly guard his disposition, so that he maintains equanimity in all situations. Hillel is worth your losing on his account 400 zuz and yet another 400 zuz, but Hillel will not take offense." So this is a piece of Agadah. There's no halacha on the one hand here, no law, it's a story. And it tells us about the character, the qualities of Hillel, but it also does give us a piece of how we're supposed to live. We should be gentle. We should not lose our temper when someone's asking what we think is a foolish question, because there is no such thing. We should put aside our own priorities, even if it's taking a bath before Shabbos. We should put aside our own priorities for another human being. There are multiple stories throughout our tradition of great rabbis who were walking to their high holidays at one point, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, whatever it was, and they heard a baby crying, or there's a woman in distress, whatever it may be, and they stopped and they spent the time with the person who needed it. Because in that moment, that was more important than making sure they got to their high holidays and started the services on time. We learn that here from Hillel, that kind of behavior from Hillel. There's a phrase, it's called Lifnei Mishorat Hadin, or Lifnei Mishorat Hadin. It means before the line of the law. You can follow the law. The law was he had to prepare for Shabbos. The law said he could have told the man, "Look, come back to me after Saturday night. We'll talk." But following the law doesn't make you a mensch. It doesn't make you a good person. You can follow the law and still be a nasty, nasty individual. Hillel teaches us this concept of being before the line of the law, of choosing to, the law's over here, but I'm going to choose to do better than that. I'm going to be a mensch. The great story that I love to relay is about my friend and teacher, Rabbi Elijah Shochet. And Rabbi Shochet used to tell this story about how when he was a child, he's walking in Chicago. I think it was with his grandfather, might have been his dad, but I think his grandfather. He's got an ice cream and they're walking, and suddenly his grandfather slows him down. When they get home, his grandfather says, "Eli, do you know why I slowed us down?" Rabbi Shochet, the child, says, no, Grandpa, why? And the man says, in front of us, there was an old man who couldn't walk very quickly. He was walking slowly. We were not in a rush. We didn't need to go rushing past him to make him feel old and weak. We could wait. That's lifnei mishort hadin. That's what Hillel exemplifies. That's the behavior that a Jew really needs to live by. Now, this isn't a piece of law. It's a piece of agadah, of lore. But again, remember last week I said that I side in the minority, but I believe that most of our laws come out of the stories, not the other way around. Let's read a little bit more about Hillel. Okay? So it goes on. The rabbis taught in Brisa, an early teaching, that it once happened that a Gentile came before Rabbi Shammai and said to him, how many Torahs do you Jews have? Shammai replied to him, we have two. We have the written Torah, and we have the oral Torah. That's what becomes Talmud. The Gentile said to him, as for the Torah that is written, I believe you, that it was given by God, but concerning the Torah that is oral, I do not believe you. Convert me to Judaism on condition that you will teach me only the written Torah, and that I'll only be bound by its tenets. Upon hearing this, Shammai berated him for his insolence and sent him away disapprovingly. Afterwards, however, this Gentile came before Rabbi Hillel with the same request, and Hillel converted him to Judaism. Brisa relates the end of the story. One day, Hillel was teaching the alphabet to this new convert, and he said to him, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, that's the order of the Hebrew letters, A, B, C, D, etc., and so on. But the following day, when the convert came for the next lesson, Hillel reversed the names of the letters for him, teaching him that the letter he had called an Aleph the day before was really a Tov. The letter he had called a Bet was really, a Shin. So the idea, he says A, B, C, D, and he says, no, that actually is Z, Y, X, W. Taken aback by the change, the convert said to Hillel, yesterday you did not recite it to me this way. Hillel replied to him, so you see then, are you not relying upon me to recognize the letters of the Aleph Bet? So therefore, rely on me also about the veracity, the truth of the oral law. Again, Hillel teaching us that we should be exemplary. We should make an example of how to teach things. We should be gentle. We should be kind. Still strong, but we should be kind in our teachings. There was another incident involving a certain Gentile who came before Shammai and said to him, Shammai, convert me to Judaism on condition that you will teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one foot. Upon hearing these words, Shammai pushed the person away with his ruler that he was holding in his hand. Undeterred, the Gentile came before Hillel and presented him with the same request, and Hillel converted him. Before the conversion, Hillel said to him, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. This, in a few words, is the entire Torah. The rest is but an elaboration of this one central point. Now go and do it. Go and learn it. This is not the golden rule. It's a version, it's similar. But Hillel is saying, don't do to anyone else what you don't want them doing to you. Now go learn it. Now go do it. The difference between this and what Jesus teaches, which is a couple of centuries after Hillel, the difference is that according to the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you're a masochist, that gives you permission to be sadistic to other people, right? You like pain, therefore you can give pain to other people. Hillel's is much more precautionary because Hillel says, don't do to anyone else what you don't want them doing to you. So if you're a masochist, that doesn't give you the right to be sadistic. And you need to be careful. Don't do to anyone else what you don't want them doing to you. It's a beautiful lesson to teach ourselves and our children and our grandchildren. So this teaches us about who Hillel is, about what he does and how he lives, his gentleness, his kindness, and his strength, and his persistence and consistency. He is always looking at the individual. He's always looking that the real Torah is inside our hearts, and it just needs to be brought out. So he doesn't judge people that way. He's not harsh in that way. Hillel is very beautiful in that way. All right, I want to switch now. I'd like to move to page, let's see what this is, page 8. This is the page that on the top, it says chapter 1, Berachos. Looks like this. Okay. And it's page 8 in your handout. This, again, is going to give us a teaching. It's going to be an agadic teaching, but it's going to be a very important teaching, especially for all of us now in this world where people get sick physically, mentally, emotionally. It's really a primary teacher on what we call Bikur Cholim, which is how to visit the sick. When in Judaism, when we visit the sick, we have an obligation to help them get better. We believe that when you visit someone who is sick, you remove 1/60th of their sickness. It says that in the Talmud. That does not mean if you visit them 60 times, they're well. It means that each time you're moving 1/60th, so they get better. But how do you visit the sick? And what's involved? And what are the teachings? So let's read a little bit about this story. Rabbi Chaya bar Abba was ill, and Rabbi Yochanan went to go visit him. And he asked Rabbi Chaya, "Are these afflictions dear to you?" Rabbi Chaya bar Abba answered him, "Neither the afflictions nor their reward." Yochanan said to him, "Give me your hand." Chaya bar Abba gave him his hand, and Yochanan revived him. Right there, we have a great teacher. The first thing that Yochanan is having an honest conversation with his colleague, with his friend, is, are you attached to the rewards of the sickness? Now, if we're honest, being sick has a lot of advantages. People come to you, they're nicer to you, they take care of you, they bring you chicken soup, they do everything you need. So there are rewards. They're not worth it, but there are rewards to being sick. So the first thing Yochanan says to him is, are you attached to this? Chaya says, no, I want to get better. I want to feel better. And so what does Yochanan do? He gives him his hand. But Chaya has to take it. He doesn't make Chaya stand up. He doesn't pick him up. The exact opposite. He puts out his hand, and Chaya has to take his own responsibility for getting better upon himself. Takes Yochanan's hand, he rises, and he is better. And the Talmud goes on. And this is where it gets really beautiful. Rabbi Yochanan was then ill. So right afterwards, Yochanan gets ill. And Rabbi Hanina went to visit him and asked him, are these afflictions dear to you? Rabbi Yochanan answered him, neither they nor the reward. Rabbi Hanina said to him, give me your hand. Why did Rabbi Yochanan give him his hand, and Rabbi Hanina revived him? The Gemara asks, why did Rabbi Yochanan need Rabbi Hanina's help? Let Rabbi Yochanan revive himself, since he revived Chaya so much earlier. And the Gemara answers, this is something rabbis do. We often ask a question, we already know the answer, and we answer it ourselves. And they said, a captive cannot release himself from prison. He needs help from someone outside. So even Yochanan, who was this great healer, when he was sick, he needed someone else to come to him. Just because that person is a great healer, or a great doctor, or a great whatever, all of us need help. All of us. And that's why we all need to help each other. We need to help each other by reaching out, by visiting, by being there and listening. Everyone needs help. No one can go through everything by themselves. Everybody needs help. And this is a teaching to remind us of that, as well as a teaching of how to get out of our sicknesses, whatever they are, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever they may be. We need to take the first step ourselves, and we need the advice of another. I had a conversation with one of the members of our community as an addiction recovery specialist, that this is really the primary concept behind the concept in the 12-step programs of having a sponsor. That you got to reach out to ask someone, and you got to put your hand out, but everyone needs somebody, always. We all need somebody, what we call in Hebrew chavruta, a chevre, a friend, a chaver. So this tells us more about, again, laws that come out of this story. We need to go visit the sick. We need to make sure that the sick takes responsibility for their own healing. They need to realize that they are letting go of certain rewards. All of this is part of our practice of Birkat Cholim. Again, all these are just little pieces found in the Talmud. Now I want to spend a little bit of time, the majority of time of the rest of the session, on the next piece of Talmud. This is found on page, what is this? Page 9. Okay, and in the bottom it says, the oven, lo bashamayim he, it is not in heaven. One of the most famous pieces in Talmud. This is taught in a lot of different ways. We're going to study it a little bit differently than it's usually taught, but it's a very, very famous story. So let's read it first and then analyze it. And again, if you have a question, just chime it in. You can also email events@nersimcha.org, and they'll get it to me in some way about what if you have a question on it. So the following Mishnah is going to allude to an incident in which a Tana, a great teacher, was offended. And the Gemara relates the incident and how quickly his prayers were answered. So we have learned in the Mishnah, it's an earlier teaching, if someone cuts sections for an oven and puts sand between the sections to cement them together, and the oven came into contact with something that's not pure, Rabbi Eliezer declares it tahor. He says it's clean, but the sages all declare it tameh. Turn the page, and this is the oven of the Ankya, of the Coiled Serpent. The Gemara explains what is meant by the Coil of Serpent. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, it means that they, the sages, surrounded the oven with discussions like this Coiled Serpent, and then they declared that it was impure. So what we're talking about is an oven. If you remember when you were little, or when your kids were little, and they were in elementary school, and they made clay little pots, right? And they rolled up a bunch of clay into a little ball, right? And they rolled it up, and they made it, and then they made it into a circle, right? And then they made another one, and they put that on top, and another one on top. That's what the oven looks like. And what cements the different levels together is a type of sand or cement. So what we're really looking at is an oven made of two different substances, one tahor, one tameh, one that's pure, one that's not as pure or impure. And they're cemented together. And all the sages say it's not clean. And Rabbi Eliezer, who's a great mystic and a great teacher, and Rabbi Akiva's teacher, we've heard of Rabbi Akiva, says, no, it is clean. And they start to have arguments about this. Let's look at their arguments. This is page 10. A Baraisa taught that on that day, Rabbi Eliezer advanced all the arguments in the world to defend his lenient ruling, but the sages did not accept his arguments. So Rabbi Eliezer said to them, if the halakha, if the law accords with me, let this carob tree prove it. Whereupon the carob tree was uprooted from its place, moved 100 amos, and some say 400 amos. So he says, look, you're not accepting any of my intellectual arguments, so I'll tell you what, if I'm right, that tree will prove it. And the tree gets up and moves 100 yards. This should be enough, right? This should, obviously, something's here that's supernatural. It's very phantasmagoric. And unconvinced, the sages said to him, you cannot bring proof from a carob tree. So they said, we don't care about miracles. And this is an important piece in Jewish law. A miracle does not mean you're right. Okay, miracles mean garnished. They mean nothing to us. A miracle does not mean that the argument is correct or that the law sides with it. It just means that that is some sort of supernatural thing that is happening. He then said to them, if the halakha, if the law accords with me, let the water canal prove it, whereupon the water in the water canal flowed backwards, and the sages said to him, you cannot bring proof from a water canal. So he's made every intellectual argument. They say you're wrong. We don't think it's clean. You can't do it. He says, if I'm right, let the tree prove it. The tree gets up, moves 100 yards. They say, we don't care about a tree. He says, if I'm right, let the water prove it. The water runs backwards. They say, we don't care about water. He then said to them, if the halakha, if the law accords with me, let the walls of this house of study prove it, whereupon the walls of the house of study, the building they were in, started to lean and were about to fall. When Rabbi Yehoshua rebuked the walls and said to them, if Torah scholars are arguing with one another about halakha, what business is of yours? And the walls did not fall out of respect for Rabbi Yehoshua, neither did they right themselves out of respect for Rabbi Eliezer, and they still continue to lean this day. That's a how come or how to story to explain why the walls might be leaning a little bit. So again, he's shown with the carob tree. He's given every intellectual argument. He's shown with the carob tree. He's shown with the water. They don't care. The walls start to fall. They say, stay out of it. Rabbi Eliezer continues. He said to the sages, if the halakha, the law accords with me, let heaven itself prove it. Excuse me for 1 second, just because there's a funeral coming up. Okay. Let the walls of this house of study, or let the heaven prove it itself. Whereupon a bought coal, a heavenly voice, went forth and proclaimed, what argument do you have with Rabbi Eliezer, whom the halakha follows in all places? And upon hearing this, Rabbi Yehoshua stood on his feet and declared, Lo bashamayim he, it is not in heaven. In other words, you gave the Torah to us. He does that in Parsha Shoftim. We studied a few weeks back in the book of Deuteronomy. You should go to the judges, the rabbis of your time for judgment. So when God himself says, don't argue with Eliezer, he's correct. They say, hey, stay out of it, God. By the way, this is a really fun piece of Talmud to teach at a Catholic university, as I did at Loyola Marymount, because this is the point that the Catholic kids all think that God's going to strike Yehoshua down with lightning or something. That's not our way. The Gemara interjects, what is meant by lo bashamayim he, it is not in heaven? Rabbi Meir said, it means that we pay no heed to a heavenly echo in matters of law, for the Torah was already given to man at Mount Sinai. So it was given to us to interpret. The Gemara relates the rest of Rabbi Yehoshua's response to the heavenly echo. We do not pay attention to a heavenly echo because you already wrote in the Torah which you gave to us at Mount Sinai, according to the majority, the matter shall be decided. And since the majority of the sages dispute Rabbi Eliezer's position, his position is rejected in practice. He gives intellectual arguments, they don't care. He gives the carob tree, they don't care. The water runs backwards, they don't care. Walls start to fall, they don't care. God says to them, don't argue. They say, God, stay out of it. It's for us to decide. All very passionate about this oven. Maybe it's not an oven. This following incident dramatically highlights the assertion by Rabbi Yehoshua Rabbi Nassan once met Elijah, and Rabbi Nassan said to him, "What was the Holy One, blessed be he, doing at the moment when Rabbi Yeshua rejected the heavenly signal?" Elijah responded to him, "He, the Holy One, was laughing and smiling and saying, 'My children have prevailed over me. My children have prevailed over me.'" Because God takes joy when we use his own words against him for our own cause. So this is a great piece about the Torah, law, is meant to be interpreted in the time that it exists. It's meant to be interpreted in the places that it exists. That's why each community makes their own minhag, their own customs. That's why we're able to have Reform Judaism and Orthodox Judaism. Very, very different practices of the religion. Because these Reform people have said, well, you know what? We think that in this time we need to change the law this way. And these have said we don't. So, very, very powerful statement. And they're very passionate about it. But let's continue with the story. Often when you study this passage in a typical religious school setting, this is where it ends. And it's a wonderful piece to show why the power should be in the hands of rabbis, because that they really know what's best and all that. That's not what this piece is really about, I don't think, even in the slightest. So let's continue on with the rest of the story. A number of drastic developments followed the debate concerning this oven, and they are recorded. They said that on that day, the sages collected all the things that Rabbi Eliezer had previously declared tahor, or pure, and they burned them in fire. And they voted on him, and they excommunicated Rabbi Eliezer. Pretty serious. They just refuted every one of his past judgments, and they excommunicated him. From excommunication, that's pretty harsh over an oven, isn't it? They said, "Who will inform him?" And Akiva said to them, "I will go, for I am concerned that perhaps an unfit person will go and inform him and bring about the destruction of the entire planet, because we believe that a sage, a mystic like Rabbi Eliezer, this is not someone you want to upset, because the world is on his side and all sorts of horrible things can happen." So what did Rabbi Akiva do to inform Rabbi Eliezer? He dressed in black and clothed himself in black. And he sat before Rabbi Eliezer at a distance of 4 yards, 4 amos. And when do we dress ourselves in black and we stay away from somebody? When they're dead. We don't go near a corpse. So Akiva is treating his teacher Eliezer as if he is dead, because on a certain level, he is. Rabbi Eliezer said to him, "Akiva, my friend, why is it different today than all other days? Why are you sitting so far away from me today?" And Rabbi Akiva replied to him, "My teacher, it seems to me that your colleagues are removed from you." So he's saying, your colleagues, you're now dead in their eyes. On hearing this, Rabbi Eliezer too tore his garments, which is what we do when we are in mourning, removed his shoes, which is what we do when we're in mourning, slid off his chair and sat on the ground. It's what we do when we're in mourning, we sit shiva. Tears flowed from his eyes, and at that time the world was smitten. A third of the world's olives, a third of its wheat, and a third of the barley became ruined, and some say even dough already in a woman's hands became spoiled. Horrible things happen. All these horrible things are happening. This great sage is excommunicated. All these horrible things are happening. All over an oven. The Gemara cites another Baraisa, another early teaching that describes the aftermath of that day. The Baraisa taught a great blow occurred on that day. For every place in which Rabbi Eliezer set his eyes went up in flames. It even happened that Rabbi Gamaliel, the Nasi, so he's the head of the assembly, was coming in a boat, and a gale threatened to drown him. And Gamaliel said to God, "It seems to me that this is only because of Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkonos." Rabbi Gamaliel stood on his feet, and he said, "Ribbono shel Master of the universe, it is well known to you that I did not do this," in other words, order Rabbi Eliezer's excommunication, "for my own honor, or for the honor of my father's household. I did it for your honor, God, so that disputes not proliferate in Israel." Whereupon the sea subsided from its raging. So the head of the assembly is about to be drowned by God with this storm. Until this head says, "Look, God, I didn't do this so I could feel more important than Eliezer. I did this for your honor, and so that there would not be fights among the people of Israel with each other. They would not be arguing with each other." Again, seems like an awful lot over an oven. Continues with another consequence. Ima Shalom, the wife of Rabbi Eliezer, was the sister of Rabbi Gamaliel. So just like Yochanan and Reish Lakish, They were brother-in-laws and friends. Her name, Ima Shalom, means the mother of peace. From that incident, in which Rabbi Gamaliel excommunicated Rabbi Eliezer onwards, she did not let Rabbi Eliezer fall on his face. In other words, she didn't let him recite the Tachanun supplication. We don't recite that on all days, but one of the parts of the Tachanun supplication is that our enemies are defeated. One day she thought it was Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, when Tachanun is not recited, but she had confused a full moon with a deficient one. Remember, new moons, our days change, and we're not always sure. She thought it was a full moon, a full month, but it actually was a shorter month. There are those who say that a poor person came and stood at the door as Rabbi Eliezer was about to recite the Tachanun supplication. She took bread out to him. Either way, she afterwards found Rabbi Eliezer falling on his face in recitation of Tachanun. She said to him, "Get up, you're killing my brother." Meanwhile, at the exact same moment, an announcement went forth from the house of Rabbi Gamaliel, stating that he had died. "How did you know about Gamaliel's death?" Eliezer said. She said to him, "I received such a tradition from the house of my grandfather, King David, that all of the gates of heaven are locked except for the gates of Ona'ah." Ona'ah here is translated as wronging. Ona'ah is really to say things that are inappropriate. When you gossip, when you say something bad, that has implications at the deepest spiritual levels. It can't be taken back. It's really a problem. But let's look at this story for a minute. So they're arguing about an oven made of two substances that are cemented together. All the rabbis say it's not clean, it's tameh. Eliezer says it's tahor. They have an argument. Eliezer advances all of the correct intellectual arguments. The sages still say, "Sorry, you're wrong." He says, "If I'm right, let the tree prove it. The tree moves 40 yards. They say, "We don't care about a tree." He says, "If I'm right, let the water prove it. The water runs backwards." He says, "They say, we don't care about water." He says, "Let the walls of this house of study prove it. If I'm right, the walls start to fall." They say, "Walls, stop. Walls, stop." He says, "If I'm right, let God prove it." And they all hear about Kol, a heavenly voice, say to them, "Don't argue with Eliezer, he's right." And the rabbis look up to God and they say, "Stay out of it. Lo bashamayim he." Lo, it is not bashamayim he. It is not bashamayim, in heaven. It is not in heaven. Stay out of it. You gave it to us. The story then continues. Gamaliel is almost drowned because of this until he says to God, "Wait a minute, God, I didn't do this for my own glory. I did this so there wouldn't be fights amongst Israel. They wouldn't proliferate and grow." And later on, Gamaliel dies anyway. Horrible story on the one hand, but it doesn't make sense if all that we're talking about is an oven. We're going to take one of the greatest sages in history and we're going to invalidate all of his decisions. We're going to excommunicate him because he disagrees about an oven. It doesn't make sense. So part of Talmud, so let's look deeper. And I was asked once to write an article on this, and I did. You'll find it at the back of your handouts, going through what we're going to talk about right now in great detail. Let's look through this. Remember I said last week that often in Talmud, it's the language of sages, the language of really wise individuals. And they speak in a language that they all understand, but it's not necessarily a language that someone else would understand. Well, this is not a traditional interpretation. I think you will find it valuable and worthwhile. Most people seem to. So what's really going on here? I think it's safe to say that there's something other than an oven going on here. The kashrut, the cleanliness of an oven, is that really something that people die over? It seems a little bit much. Moreover, it's the whole Gamaliel makes the whole point that, wait, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this so there aren't more arguments. There's not conflict that proliferates among the Jews. Again, over an oven, who cares? But what if it's not an oven? What if the oven is merely a different language for something else? Remember I said last week, let's say we were talking about marital intimacy and my 11-year-old sons came in here. And I don't want to talk about marital intimacy in front of them. So I might start saying, okay, it's about painting. And when the painter takes his paintbrush and he dips it in the paint, right? We all know what we're talking about here. It's not talking about painting and paint and paintbrushes, right? We're talking in a language that the child will not understand. In the same way, I believe that what's going on here is that in the same way, there's something else going on besides just an oven. that understand deeper levels of Torah, whether it's pieces of Torah or Tanakh, the Bible, or Talmud, or anything else. We are taught to look at what is right before what we're studying and right after. If you remember when we talked about the Levitical code about homosexuality and the different interpretations, we looked at the phrases, the verses right before and right after, and we saw that it also had to do with relationships that are not equal. There's no parity. In the same way, let's look at what's right before and right after. Okay? Let's turn back to the very beginning of this text, to page 9. And let's see what it says is the paragraph right before we start this study, to study this portion on this oven that caused so much trouble and so much grief. Rabbi Barclay said, a person must be careful about his wife's honor, because blessing is found in a person's house only on account of his wife. Okay? Honor your wives in order that you may become wealthy. So the first part is talking about marriage, between a wife and a husband, between a man and a wife, man and woman. At the end of this, if we look again, after we are done all of this, it says the rabbis taught in a baraisa. This is right after, we're going back to page 12 or whatever it is, that right after Gamliel dies. It says the rabbis taught in a baraisa, someone who verbally wrongs a convert transgresses 3 prohibitions. Someone who oppresses him transgresses 2. So the first part is talking about marriage, and the second part is talking about the non-Jew, someone who's converting to Judaism or not, but someone who's not born a Jew. Let's remember that the Talmud is compiled, 1,800, 2,000 years ago. These dialogues are from before that, even a couple hundred years. And the big fear to the rabbis then is really no different than one of the concerns to rabbis today: interfaith marriage. We want to assimilate all too often. And so in assimilating often, we let go of our traditions, and a Jewish boy marries a non-Jewish girl or vice versa. That's a concern, because what's going to happen to the children? Are they going to be Jews? Are they not? Etc. That was a concern then. It's a concern with the Romans. It's a concern with the Greeks. It's a concern every time we have been involved with other cultures, that we would lose our identity through assimilation. And the first big step of that is interfaith marriage. It is a big concern outside the Reform world, especially. So much that I don't know if it's still true, but in the conservative, obviously in the Orthodox as well, but even in the conservative world, I don't know if it's still true, but it used to be true that if you were a member of the Conservative Rabbis Union, the Rabbinical Assembly, you were not allowed to even attend, forget about officiate, you weren't even allowed to attend an interfaith marriage. It's a big concern for the preservation of the Jewish people. Moreover, it's a big concern because it can cause huge, huge fights. So a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman, and they have a child. And the child falls in love with a girl. It's wonderful. And the girl is the daughter of Orthodox rabbis, let's say. And they say, that's beautiful. This couple loves each other, except now we got more fights because this family, the girl's family, doesn't accept that this kid's a Jew, because he has a father who's a Jew, not a mother. And in Judaism, our religion's passed matrilineally. So it causes all sorts of fights and problems between their families, their friends, and everything else, and the boy and girl who love each other very much. What if this whole discussion has nothing to do with an oven at all? What if what this discussion is really about is interfaith relationships? 2 substances cemented together, 2 different disparate substances cemented together. Eliezer speaks from God's point of view. And I believe that if 2 people love each other, I don't think you can say God's not present. My experience is when 2 people love each other, God is standing between them and God is cementing that love. Any 2 people. But that doesn't mean it's okay. It's okay in God's eyes. God's saying 2 of my creatures love each other. That's okay. But for all the other rabbis, they're saying, no, it's not okay in this world at this time. It's not okay. And we don't care if a carob tree says it's okay. We don't care what Eliezer's comments say are okay. We don't care about the water, about the walls, or even if God himself says it's okay. We don't care. What we care about is our tribe. We are the preservers of our traditions. We are the repositories of Jewish knowledge. We want the culture to continue, the religion to thrive. And when there's an interfaith marriage, we know that there will be more disputes will be proliferated among the people of Israel that aren't necessary. So what if this whole dialogue has nothing to do with an oven at all? What if, in fact, it's talking about interfaith relationships? What it's saying is that in God's eyes, it may be wonderful, but in our eyes, in our value system working in this physical world, it's not okay. And so they have to excommunicate Eliezer. They treat him as if he's dead. They invalidate everything that he ever did. It's very sad, but it kind of teaches us how often, and this is considered a piece of Agadah, of storytelling, even though it deals with the law of an oven, and I believe also the law of interfaith marriage. But it also teaches us really clearly that we need to look at the world from both not only God's perspective, but from our perspective of living it. And that we're supposed to do that. Remember, Elijah says, God laughed and smiled and said, my children have defeated me, my children have prevailed over me. This piece teaches us so beautifully, so richly. It teaches us how the Talmud can be talking about one thing, ostensibly, but in reality, talking about something entirely different. Entirely different. And if we're really going to let the Talmud pass through us, if we're really going to allow ourselves to let it work its way through us, to study and to learn it, then we need to look at it on multiple levels, both the Peshat, the simplistic understanding, as well as in the context of other things, the verses immediately before and immediately after. So these are some examples of Talmud. If you want, you can read the article about Bob Metzia, this particular piece, afterwards in your handout. But the idea is that Talmud is something that's really worth studying, and it doesn't matter what you want to learn. And we're going to start doing some classes, just random classes that we may do every other week or so, that will be on different topics in the Talmud, like Birkat Cholim, healing the sick. Some of the topics we've covered in the live classes in our Talmud and Tobacco program that we do every month. But some of those same classes on video, so that people who haven't been able to come, they can see it, they can stream, and you can learn it. Talmud deals with everything. There's pages on dreams and dream interpretation. There's pages on all sorts of mystical things, pages on marital intimacy, pages on money management. There's teachings that are so valid, not just for 2,000 years ago, but for today. I really want to encourage everyone to spend some time studying Talmud. There's a fabulous book. It's called Every Man's Talmud. And it is a wonderful book that breaks apart Talmud it has a little taste of Talmud based on different sections. This is about God. This is about man. This is about this topic, that topic, this topic. It's a wonderful book called Every Man's Talmud. It's a great introductory book to start to explore the magic and the wonder of this amazing text. If you read a page a day of the Talmud, it takes 7.5 years to finish. I also want to recommend to everyone that you go to a website called accidentaltalmudist.com. The Accidental Talmudist. It's my friend Sal Litvak's site, and I think he has over 1 million followers on it now, where every day they're studying Talmud, and you can come in or come out and studying a little bit. He's going through a page a day every day. And a lot of, some of it you may not be so interested. That's the law about kashrut or the laws about this or that aren't so interesting in your own personal life, but you'll find a lot of things that are. And so I really want to recommend his website, accidentaltalmudist.com. But to really learn some of these stories and some of these teachings, it only gets richer and richer and richer. Okay? Now let's look at a couple of things historically for a moment before we call it a night. In 586 before the Common Era, the first temple is destroyed, the second temple is rebuilt, and in 70 of the Common Era, the second temple is destroyed by the Romans. And they disperse the Jews everywhere. And at that point, we leave Israel, most of us leave, and go all over the world through the Roman Empire, and ultimately all over the world. At that point, there's going to end up being 3 divisions of Judaism. not denominations, not religious practices, but 3 divisions. There will be those Jews who go ultimately end up in Eastern Europe. They're going to be called Ashkenazi. They will pick up the habits of the people around them, of the Eastern European Catholics, the Ashkenazi. There will be those who are called Sephardi. Sephardi is the word for Spain in Hebrew. And they will go into Spain, Portugal, that part of the world, Italy. And then it's considered a subsect of Sephardi, but it's its own culture in many ways, called Mizrahi, which are the ones who go right, and Sephardi go into Morocco. And the Mizrahi are the ones who go into what is now Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, those parts of the world. Okay? And in each of these cases, as the Jews get dispersed, remember when they're in Israel, they're all in one place. But as they go to these other areas, to the Ashkenazi, into your Eastern Europe, as you get into the Sephardi and Spain, Portugal, Morocco, Italy, France, as you get into the Mizrahi in Iraq and Iran, they're going to pick up the habits of the people around them. They're going to pick up the dietary habits of the people around them. So as an example, rice is not prohibited in the Torah during Passover, but the Ashkenazi say it's prohibited because it grows when it's in water, as opposed to the Sephardi, who very much live with rice, say, no, we can eat rice during Passover. So they pick up different customs. Their food is different. Sephardic food is usually much spicier, Sephardic Jewish food. They pick up musical influences. So let's see if I can do this. The same melody in the Ashkenazi way would be yai dai 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 yai dai 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 dai. That's very Germanic. It's very Eastern European. The same exact notes in the Sephardic way would be yai dai 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 dai. Same melody, just more of a kick to it. So the Sephardi and the Ashkenazi, we will start to pick up now that we're getting out of Israel. We're starting to pick up the habits of the people and the communities upon which we go to, where we go. The other thing that is going to happen is that we are going to have to re-evaluate what is Judaism. Prior to 70 of the Common Era, Judaism is practiced from the time of Abraham to 70 of the Common Era, so roughly 1700 years. It's practiced and it's temple-centric. It's based upon Jerusalem, it's based upon the temple, the Holy of Holies, etc. When the temple is destroyed and the Jews are dispersed all over, that can no longer be the focus. We can't be temple-centric. Remember, we talked about how the Bible itself, the vast majority of the writings in the Tanakh and the Bible are either by King David, by King Solomon, about King David, about King Solomon, about the temple. That stops being practical, and we stop living what's biblical Judaism, and we start living what's called Rabbinic Judaism. We were Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi. We will start to practice Rabbinic Judaism, Judaism that is defined by the rabbis who have come up with ways in which to have the same experience psycho-emotionally, spiritually, as the participant did when they went to the temple, but now without a temple. We become, instead of a people of the building, we become a people of the book, a people of our rituals, a people of our ways. And that's what we're going to start studying for the rest of these weeks. And it is important to understand that we've now finished biblical Judaism. We've really entered into the rabbinic Jewish world with the Talmud, which tells us how to do things, and continues into what we will experience in Judaism from then all the way to the present. So we'll start going into that more next week. I cannot recommend highly enough. Pick up Every Man's Talmud, start studying it. Is there a question? Is that why you've got a hand up over there?
There's
No.
a question.
There's a question.
Is it true that male line is counted in the tribes and female line is for being Jewish?
Female line is for being Jewish. Male line is counted in the different tribes, and it is also counted specifically for Kohanim and Levites. Okay, so it's going to, the idea of being a Kohen, as we discussed weeks ago, is passed patrilineally. But the idea of being Jewish, are you a Jew or not, is passed matrilineally. Up until the Reform movement, and even the Reform movement, I think that changed only in the 60s or 70s, where they started saying that, well, patrilineal also is someone who's Jewish. But it causes arguments. Exactly what Gamaliel was worried about. It starts happening because someone says, he's not a Jew, and that becomes a problem. So Again, this is all explored in Talmud. We're going to explore more of it as we go on and start to see how Judaism develops in our theology, in our mysticism, and especially right after the destruction of the temple, in not only the Talmud, but in our prayers. Because our prayers are really the prayer book that is structured, really becomes this amazing key that takes all of Judaism from biblical Judaism and allows us to have the same experience in our prayer services if we allow ourselves to. And that is the key. We must open ourselves up so that it can pass through us and we can experience these things. So thank you for being good to me. Thank you for saying these things tonight, for sharing these things. Again, if you have any issues, questions, you can post them. You can email events@nersimcha.org. And I hope to see everyone next week. And also this Friday, we have services, which are wonderful. Friday night, we have services with a bat mitzvah young woman, and she will be then leading services on Saturday for her bat mitzvah, which is wonderful. So thank you for being good. And I look forward to seeing you at least virtually or possibly in person. We do have live services on Friday night. They are socially distant, but I hope to see you in person on Friday night or virtually. And then again next week as well as we study together. Thanks.